Welcome back to the Djellab channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys are doing very well at home. Joining me today, Alice, you're back on the channel. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks. Got to watch Man U beat Newcastle, so...
Makes a change.
I know, you get to win for a change. So
exactly.
Nice.
Patrick, how are you doing, mate? How's your week been?
I'm all good, man. I checked out the football. I don't know why Arsenal fans were feeling hopeful the other day.
Oh, the Spurs
I was
stuff.
just like, don't hope. Like, there's no point. Spurs are never going to do anything when it matters. So just like leave it.
It was very interesting. I saw a video of Sonny singing Man City's chants afterwards. Whoa. It was very interesting for Spurs fans. And we'll get on to Spurs. As you can see by the title of the video, we're going to go through every single Premier League team and rank how their season has been. And we're going to put them down into a few different tier lists. As this is going on as well, you'll see the tier list come up on screen. The first one, the best one, team of the season. Now, I think really we can only put one team in here. Maybe I'll stretch to two, but I think it should be one. We're then going to have good, fine, poor, and should be relegated. And we'll go through every single team in alphabetical order and chat about them, give our thoughts on how their season has been, and see where they end up. And alphabetically in the Premier League, that puts Arsenal first, Patrick. And it's interesting with Arsenal because I think if we've still got obviously one game left. It's the last game week this weekend, Sunday. All the games kick off at 4 p.m. And if things go Arsenal's way and they end up lifting the Premier League trophy, then they should be in the team of the season. They've done an incredible job this year, I think, overall. It's very hard to kind of complain, I think, as an Arsenal fan, when you look at really only a couple of results not going the best way for Arsenal. I think about the Aston Villa results in particular, to kind of put any slander on their name.
Yeah, I think it's been an amazing season. Like I kind of thought that this season we'd maybe take a bit of a step back, because last year was such a huge leap up from the season before, and because we had faded a lot towards the end, and also because we kind of remade the midfield. Like, and I get that Declan Rice was like a great upgrade, but that's not always the way it works. You know, sometimes, like, especially when it's a key role in the centre of the park, the team needs to learn to kind of fit together again. And I do actually think you saw that before Christmas, where we were a little bit clunky. But ultimately, we've ended up with a much better attack than last season, a much better defence than last season. The team is better across the board. It's clearly much more robust. Like the fact that last year we gave it up down the stretch, and this year, okay, it's very unlikely, but it has gone to the final day.
Yeah.
And also, we're probably going to, if we win, we'll end up with 89 points, which is crazy.
It is crazy now, I think, that we're in an era where, like, you need to be going plus 90 to be winning the Premier League. And, like, even then, we've seen Liverpool get, 96, 97?
They got
something like that.
97, didn't they?
And still not win the Premier League. Like, it's tough when you're competing against the machine that is Man City, I guess, isn't it, Alice?
What I think is mad is I think Arsenal have won 17 of their last 19 games or something like that, and they still might not win the league. Like, that is the standard now. Best defence, I think best attack, best goal difference, like deservingly winning their games and playing good football, winning like 17 out of 19 games, you know, going to the Etihad, stopping them scoring for the first time in like a year there. Like, all of this. Arsenal, I read, are unbeaten against the top six sides this season, which is something a couple of years ago Arsenal used to bottle it away from home against the top six. They used to get, you know, they've been battered by Man City in the past. Arsenal are going toe-to-toe with the top six. They're going and basically being the best team in the league defensively. Like, even though I don't think Arsenal were at their best when they played Man United, I thought, we're not going to score. Yeah. Like, there was nothing we could do. Saliba was just there.
The defence this year has been crazy.
It's been ridiculous. And I think, obviously, props to Declan Rice, but you've also got to give Arteta credit. He's improved Declan Rice going forward on the ball. You know, Jurrien Timber would have been a key player, and he's been injured all season. Havertz was one everyone had loads of question marks about, and he's been quite good for Arsenal. And I still don't think they have that number 9, like that's, you know, a 20-goal a season number 9. But I think when you look at Arsenal's squad compared to Man City's, their defensive record, the way they've been playing, I think that they've been better than Man City this season, even if they don't win the title. I do. Yeah,
I think when with the categories that we've got here, I do see a reason to put them in possibly the team of the season. I think, again, if they do end up lifting the trophy, you definitely do. But right now, I'm going to leave them in good, if we're all happy with that. And what do you think, Pat? Like, is it just getting a goal scoring number 9 that takes you to that next step now, or do you think you just continue the same kind of like this transfer window is going to be interesting to see kind of what Arteta looks to do, and maybe possibly if there's any players he looks to move on as well. But what do you think Arsenal need to do next season then to go one step further?
There's depth in a couple of key places. Okay. Like I do think Arsenal still need to figure out that 8 role. I think Declan Rice has obviously been used there at points this season. I don't think that's what he's best at. I think he is best as a 6.
Yeah.
And if you've got a fullback stepping into midfield, then he'll still be able to get forward. But I think in some of the key games, particularly the Bayern games in the Champions League, you saw what you lose from having a guy there who is not quite as silky as you might want.
Yeah.
You want somebody there who is better at dribbling through pressure, whereas Declan Rice is a great ball carrier, but not a great dribbler. And he's not a final pass guy. So I think that's a role that Arsenal definitely can improve. Getting Partey out of the club, that'd be great. And having a way to spell, Bukayo Saka. Like you need a guy who can cover for Saka without the team like dropping off a cliff.
Do you think that's like a versatile player then, like someone who can maybe play in the middle, can play on the left, can play on the right,
Nico Williams
at 10, maybe?
Someone like that I think would be amazing. Like if Arsenal could get somebody like that, I think that would be great. Whoever it is, I think we've seen will get plenty of minutes. Because Trossard gets plenty of minutes, and Havertz and Jesus, like they all get loads of minutes. So I think there are tons to be had, and the Champions League going to be more minutes there. Going forward. Timber coming back, I do think is big, but I don't know, this idea that like you just go and get a number 9 who scores goals and that'll solve things, I don't really believe it. Like Arsenal have scored enough goals this season to win the league. Like it's not like the attack wasn't good enough. The attack was absolutely flying in January, February, and has been very good all season, really. Like after some early season, like getting to know you stuff. To me, the question is, does an attack score enough goals? Not does one guy get all the goals?
Yeah,
and actually, let's look around at the other teams in the Premier League this season. Like Cole Palmer's got over 20 goals. I mean, a lot of penalties, but he's got over 20 goals for Chelsea. Where are Chelsea?
Fifth, hopefully.
but Watkins, Isak, even Solanke, like there are a bunch of guys who are going to either end up at 20 or just below. And not all that, Bournemouth are probably going to end up in the bottom half with a guy who's scoring about 20 goals in the league. So I think this idea that if you have a 20 goal a season striker, everything somehow magically changes, I just simply don't think it's true. I even think Haaland was less of a... I don't think it can hurt, but it depends who that guy is and like what else does it do to your play.
Yeah, does it really?
Like they need to be able to participate in other things that your side does. I mean, you also might just get lucky and have Gabi Jesus fit for more of a season, because I still think that when he plays, our attack just looks...
You're a bigger fan of him than I think other Arsenal fans are.
He has abilities that nobody else in our squad has. Dribbling in central areas. He has an aggression that almost nobody has in our front line apart from maybe Martinelli. And as much as he misses loads of big chances, he gets and scores loads of big chances as well. He's incredibly creative. I really love Gabi Jesus. And my point is more, how does the attack look with that player in there?
Yeah.
In the same way that a defence, like you may not love X or Y player, but if the defence looks great, like I don't love Kivior. But our defence was absolutely incredible in January with him playing there. It's about how that guy is used and how the players mesh.
I think there's that argument sometimes with Haaland that, yes, he obviously scores the goals that he does score, but sometimes does that make City's kind of attacking play worsen when he's on the pitch. But we'll get to Man City in time. Arsenal, I think we're going to stick them in good, because I have next Aston Villa, who for me are my team of the season. I just think what Unai Emery has done over the last coming up to 2 years now has been super, super impressive. He took them over when they were 14th and 3 points off of the drop. And whilst that was last year, so really that doesn't count for anything, he's managed to do a super, super job. Qualified for Champions League football now for the first time in Aston Villa's history in a long, long time. And he's just, I think, if you look at that Aston Villa side that were under Steven Gerrard, that were definitely underperforming massively. They had really good players and they were underperforming massively. He's coached them fantastically well. He's taken Ollie Watkins to another level now. One of the, like we talk about number 9s who Arsenal could go and look at. Villa would never sell Watkins, but wow, he could do a real good job there. And I just think what he's managed to do with this Villa side is super, super impressive. I feel like every season you see one club go above and beyond and end up in a position where you're almost like, oh wow, how's that happened? And at times that's been Brighton, at times it's been West Ham, and Aston Villa seem to have done it this year. And if you look at their squad, I feel like they have very good players there, and they've been backed very well in the summer window just gone. But he's done a very, very good job. I do think it's been helped as well, though, by the fact that other teams have underperformed. Like, we've mentioned Chelsea a bunch, but you look at, say, how Spurs started the season, then dropped massively off more recently. Newcastle, with injuries this year, has been heavily impacted. However, Unai's just got to do what he's got to do to get there, and he's managed to secure 4th place, which I think is super, super impressive. Would anyone argue against them being the team of the season?
I'd probably just give it to Arsenal, just because I think all round what Arsenal have done, I know they might not win the title, but I think considering Man City squad, Arsenal squad, everyone thought Man City would win it. I do actually think that Arsenal have looked the best team.
Okay.
But I can't argue with Villa going there for getting top 4 and everything as well. And Villa have played well, and I think the development of certain players like Watkins, even the winger Leon Bailey, I think has shown goodness this season. I think Camara's a good player. Like, they've really, really gone and progressed as this high. But I still think it's Arsenal. But I also think if Arsenal don't win the league, maybe Villa. But
that's fair enough. We're gonna put Aston Villa there.
Yeah.
And then with a caveat of if Arsenal do end up doing it, they can go there. But it's crazy that it comes down to one game, which Arsenal could still win. And we'll put them both there. Arsenal and Villa can go as our teams of the season, I should say. But yeah, Pat, how do you feel about Villa in general then this season? Because they have done a good job.
Yeah, they have. I do think they've been quite lucky in lots of ways, like with some injuries, certainly. I mean, like, you look at a team like, and with injuries to their rivals, like, I think if Newcastle had been fit, Newcastle would have finished above Villa. That's how I look at it. And I think their underlying numbers are still significantly superior to Villa's. But I don't grudge Villa. I think it's been great, and especially Watkins, I think, has been tremendous. Like, his creativity as a forward, I think, is particularly impressive. Like, we've had a lot of forwards in the league this season who've scored a lot of goals. Like, you're looking at a bunch of guys who on the last day you could end up with like 6 or 7 people hitting 20 goals, which would be crazy. Talked about this on my podcast recently, but the fact that he's also in double figures for assists, I think, is really remarkable.
He's leading, isn't he? I think he's the leading assist maker at the moment.
12 or 13 now.
Like that,
if he's
13,
on 12,
I think he's on 13.
Yeah, he kind of stalled for a while. He was on 12, stuck for a while. I think it's a great achievement. I think it will be tougher next season.
Yeah, that's fine.
Next season I think is going to be insanely competitive for the Champions League spots. I think Newcastle will be back. I think Spurs will take a step forward. Chelsea look like they finally, put their boots on the right feet. Obviously not Man United. Don't take them seriously. Rubbish. But you know what I mean. Like all the serious clubs that people support and care about. Might be there.
Might be better, yeah.
But I think it's wonderful, and I think they certainly deserve the spot. I do think it's a little bit of like who screwed up the least.
Yeah,
for that
I can understand that. I can understand that. But I think also, like, you got to remember, Villa were in European competition as well this year. Like, they had to deal with that.
No, I
too.
agree.
Yeah, really
I'm not putting it down. I just think it's I agree with them for like team of the season. I think it's a remarkable job. I just think that it's if one of those other teams had kind of got their act together or not had the injuries they'd had, then I think that like
it would have been
the
tougher.
Question of like how good Villa's season had
a little bit of luck.
Yeah, would like not even be one.
Okay. I mean, I feel like it's quite a nice story as well for Unai Emery, who the last time he was in the Premier League didn't kind of work out as well with Arsenal, to now kind of have a fan base that love him at the moment.
I mean, he did genuinely do quite a bad job with Arsenal. Like, I mean, that is the thing now. Like, there's a lot of revisionism about this, where it's just like, oh, should they have kept him? You're like, no one ever said he was a terrible manager.
Yeah.
But he did do a bad job with Arsenal. That happens.
He did indeed. But there we have it. In the team of the season, Aston Villa go. We move on to Bournemouth now, who, if you look at the start of the season when they were kicking things off, I think we did a video actually where it was talking about how your Premier League team has started this season. I think after like a month or 2 months or so, and Bournemouth wasn't that they weren't looking good. They were looking good. They just weren't getting results. But I think we spoke about the underlying numbers for a long time, how impressive Villarreal had made Bournemouth look as well, and the football they were playing. They've made a really kind of big decision as well with O'Neill. as well, moving him on to bring in Iriola, who's also just signed a new deal now. So now they've got the possibility to fast forward where we are here to finishing 10th this season. They've managed to get Dominic Solanke ripping things up goal scoring wise. They're playing super exciting football. Like, teams are not. I feel like Bournemouth back in the day used to be a team where if you were a top flight guy fighting for top 6 or whatever, if you faced Bournemouth, you were never too worried about them. Maybe they were playing a bit defensively, or Eddie Howe's Bournemouth weren't quite working out, and they were in the relegation zone. To now, it's not a fun game. It's not a fun game. They smashed Bournemouth. They smashed Brighton 3-0 recently. They did lose to Brentford, but also we get onto them in a bit. But I think Brentford have been a bit unlucky this year. Chelsea are facing Bournemouth on the final day of the season, and that's by no means an easy feat. Like, they are a tough team now, and they've got good owners, and I think in the summer could go to the next level. And for me, in terms of our ranking, I'll be having them in good. How do we feel about that?
I completely agree with that. The fact they might finish above Brighton if they win their last game against Chelsea, and Brighton drop points as well. And I think, everyone sort of put Brighton, they'll come 7th or 8th, and they've not been helped with injuries. But I think the fact that Bournemouth is one that people think, they might go down, they might stay up. I think expectation. I think they've played good. They beat Manchester United 3-0 at Old Trafford. I mean, it's not hard to dominate us, but they did absolutely dominate us. The way they played against us, they were brilliant. And I think, they've had a very good season.
No, they've been very, very good. Giving Iriola a new contract, fantastic decision. Will be interesting to see how they develop next year, and if they keep the likes of, say, Dominic Solanke. Because I wonder if there'll be a couple of clubs looking for his services this summer. But you're going into good Bournemouth. I hope you are happy. Now down to Brentford. Now, this one's interesting because if you look at the league table, Brentford are 16th, way clear of the drop. Like, they've not got to worry about that. It's really only Forest who have to worry about that if some sort of miracle happened for Luton. But this year, they have had to face quite a few different issues. Obviously, they had the Ivan Toney thing going into this season, and they started the year not too bad. I think Mbeumo really started the year super well. I spoke about Bremo, I think, last week about as a possible someone to sign for clubs in the summer. But he had a long-term injury. That was a big knock. That left really only Visser up top. Kevin Jard hasn't really worked out as a transfer so far for Brentford. Their keeper has been super poor this year. But underlying numbers-wise, they've not been too bad, have they, Pat?
No. I mean, I feel like I'm stuck in this position every year where I'm like, Brentford are pretty good. But, like, for them to go through more than half a season without Toney, the majority of the season without Toney, really, in the end. And still, not only have they stayed in the division, but they've stayed in the division while playing pretty good football. I mean, like, stuff like expected points or whatever, like, there's debate to be had about it, but they're like 9th, 10th by that. And when you watch them play, to me, that feels kind of right.
Where they are, yeah.
Like, every time I watch them, I'm like, this is a difficult team to play against. They're extremely tactically versatile. They can do lots of, like, they can play a more possession-based style. They can just hit you on the break. They can play all sorts of different formations. They've got a bunch of guys who can perform loads of different roles. They press really nicely as a team. I don't know. I think Thomas Frank, if I were Thomas Frank, I'd probably be thinking about moving on. But
I've seen rumours to Man United, possibly.
Yeah.
He should be considered for that job. Like, you don't have to give it to him necessarily, but he should be considered for it. Like, the guy has done an amazing job. Teams that come up from the Championship almost always get in trouble because in the Championship they could have possession. And in the Premier League, they can't. Look at Burnley this season. Burnley were an insanely dominant possession side in the Championship last year. They come up to the Premier League, and of course, there are personnel questions here as well. But you don't get to have 60% of the ball anymore. You're up against teams who will press and take it off you, or who are so good that you can't take it off them.
Yeah.
Like, it's a completely different world. Well, Brentford came up and just, like, developed their style to deal with that. Like, developed a different way of playing to deal with that. They've done it all along, and they do it on a shoestring. I don't know. What are our options here?
So our options
good,
we have.
decent, crap.
Good, fine, poor should be relegated. I don't think they're probably touching good.
I think I honestly go
fine
fine.
Yeah.
I think to be missing like your best player.
But Adam Wemmer as well, for such a long time.
Yeah, exactly. And yet I know there was a period where people were like, are they going to get relegated? But I think everybody who was looking at it seriously was like, no, they're not going to get relegated.
Yeah.
I think it's fine. I think poor would be really, really harsh.
Yeah, I'd say fine.
I think I'm happy to put them in fine. Again, interesting to see what happens next year. Like what talent they bring in. I think Ivan Toney will definitely leave. I do think though, Ivan Toney.
He's going to pay the money.
Well, this is what I was going to say. Ivan Toney's value has dropped though this year in terms of when he has been fit. He hasn't obviously set the league alight like he had possibly previously. Like, I don't think personally a club should be spending over £30 million on
Yeah, and in that situation, then I think Brentford can say, well, he's worth more to us than like 30 mil. We might as well keep him.
Yeah.
And then he's in this thing where like Ivan Toney has basically been like portraying himself for the last few years as too good for Brentford. Well, we'll see.
We will. And again, I just think someone has to go in for Mbeumo, but we'll see in time. We'll put Brentford into fine. We're going to talk about Brighton Hove Albion now, who are currently sitting 10th, have no chance of going higher than that, and as we mentioned earlier, do have a chance of possibly finishing, 13th. If other results go against them, they're to finish in that case under Bournemouth, Palace and Wolves. And this was a Palace side who only a month ago now, month and a half ago, were being questioned as a possible relegation candidate. I feel like Brighton this year, obviously they've had to contend now with European football and playing more games this season, have had injuries to players as well. Still did lose a lot of key players in the summer. You look at McAllister and Caicedo especially. When you do just lose your entire midfield, I think it's sometimes quite harsh to kind of expect the exact same performances. But I think they've definitely dropped off of what they were doing last year. However, with the certain caveats, Alice, like if they finish 10th, I think it's fine. If they ending up in, as I said, 13th, it's a little bit different, right?
Yeah. I think the fact that they've regressed since last season, it does sort of go slightly towards the poorer category. But I think, look, they had one of the worst injuries crisis in the league. I think, McAllister and Caicedo leaving. And I think, for me, games are often won and lost in midfield because that's where you get a lot of control. And I think midfield is something you have to get right in the summer. So I do have a little bit of sympathy for Djellab there in Brighton, and I think 10th is like, considering Brighton and the size and the injuries and the players they've lost, it's not really that bad, but I think the fact that they've regressed and they're quite a well-run club, I think it could be an element of concern. I actually think that Potter played a little bit better stuff than Djellab, which might be a bit of an unpopular opinion, and I was talking about this about a month and a half ago when we were talking about Man United managers, and I said I think Thomas Frank is a little bit better than Djellab in terms of his ability to adapt, and I got a bit of stick for that. And I think like Djellab is a good manager and stuff, and I think he's had a lot of issues this season. But for me, I think it's been quite a poor season for Brighton. They've sort of been, battered a couple of times, 3-0 losses. But I know they've had injuries, but they don't seem to have like a plan B, I feel like.
I also feel like there was a period where I think Djellab in the press was being really weird about his future at Brighton. He was kind of saying, and this might be when Bayern Munich were talking to him, and he was kind of saying like, look, I'm not signing a new deal at Brighton, but like I'm happy here and all this kind of stuff. And it kind of coincided when results really weren't going their way. And then I think he came out and said, look, I'm very happy, like I'm not going to be leaving and whatever. And then ended up kind of results turning back. I think we saw them play Chelsea yesterday, and in the second half were very, very good. But yeah, I think he's also had a few things in terms of like, I don't think Evan Ferguson has progressed this year as maybe people thought he would. Didn't maybe play him, didn't give him as much minutes as maybe expected as well. Who is the guy that's got, he's got like highlighted blonde hair in Cisco. He was, again, started the league really, really well and then got injured for a long, long time. So you did mention that injury crisis. I think if you look at a lot of teams this year, to be fair, the kind of excuse does probably go back to the injury crisis that they've had. But Brighton also fit that mould. They took a punt on Ansu Fati, who, when he's on form, is a huge talent, but again, not really worked out this season. Are you happy to put them in fine, Pat, or do you think they should maybe be a little bit lower?
No, I'm happy with fine. I mean, like, when they've lost fewer games than Newcastle and Man United, they've lost one more game than Spurs. Like, actually, when you look at them, what's really contributed to where they are in the table is the number of draws. They've got 12 draws, which I think is the most in the league, actually. No, but they got a lot of draws.
Yeah.
And when I look at stuff like that, I think, well, those games can easily go either way, and you're a couple of those results away from, having a good season, really. And to do it, having lost Caicedo, I think is pretty remarkable, and playing like genuinely children. Like a lot of the time, they are playing kids. Like there'll be like 3 or 4 19-year-olds on the pitch, which is an extremely difficult way to like build a winning side. Yeah, I agree with you that I do think that like last season there was some overpraise for Djellab, and I think that he is maybe not as flexible as you might want a coach to be if you were looking to hire him for a bigger club. But I still think they're an entertaining side. I still think they're a good side. They finish mid-table. Yeah. That's what they deserve. To me, for Brighton, that is a good season. For Brighton to be a consistently mid-table side, maybe that's not exciting like for neutrals.
Yeah.
But for Brighton, that's crazy. Yeah. And if they do that for long enough, then they will build some capital, and they'll be able to do more adventurous things in the market. And Brighton with more money is quite a scary prospect.
Well, the money, the finances that they reveal every year is just always baffling. They're like so in the green, it's crazy, or the black even. I think it's said as a financer. Fatboy Slim will be very happy, I think, overall. Down to Burnley now. I think we're gonna have our first pour here, guys. Arguably should be relegated from the off. Like they did some. You mentioned Burnley earlier. I think they did some interesting things this season in terms of wanting to, as you mentioned, naivety and kind of wanting to play their football. They did lose some key players. Like Southampton refused to sell them Nathan Tella. In the end, he got his move to Bayer Leverkusen. I don't think he's complaining with how things have gone this season for himself. But look, I think they've been unlucky in certain games where like they have had issues possibly in goal.
Yeah. I
think it took Vincent Kompany a long time to kind of make the change and take Trafford out. And we had Jacob on last week, who's a massive Burnley fan, and he mentioned how that's maybe not gone as well. And for a long time though, like Burnley had a chance, like they had chances to kind of stay up and stay in the league. They got 9 draws this season as well, and I think they've been maybe a little bit unlucky on that side, not having a few results go their way. I think to the Manchester United game again, we keep mentioning United, but that was a game where I think Burnley were probably unlucky not to take 3 points, and I think they've had a few of those results. But I do think it's like what Pat said, the naivety in maybe not adapting to the Premier League and not maybe thinking, okay, we've got to be a little bit more defensive on here and try and play counter-attacking football, hasn't quite worked out for them. I think they've been punished because of that. And for that, they're going in my poor category. Anyone else got anything to add, or do they think they were so bad they should be relegated?
They weren't like Sheffield United level bad, but I remember everyone going, "Oh, Burnley, they're going to have a great season. They're going to finish 12th. They're going to finish 11th." I saw some predictions with people predicting Burnley to finish above Spurs.
I honestly think I had Burnley like 10th.
Yeah,
I'm not joking.
Really?
I think I'm trying to go
Why?
back. Either I saw predictions or I did that prediction. I can't quite remember if it was me.
But they had so many guys in the Championship who were loanees.
Yeah.
And then they were coming up as such a dominant possession side.
Yeah.
God, that's crazy if you put Spurs, man.
People had Spurs.
People love a punchy shout.
I always remember my my Aston Villa. I was like, Villa are going to finish top 4. It was the year they had like Gerrard and awful. No. And the year after that, they just flew up with Unai. But yeah, we're going to put them in poor and move on to another side who I'd love to talk about, Chelsea Football Club.
Should be relegated.
The Blues. Let's not hit the piss here. Let's not joke around. I've put Chelsea in fine.
Yeah.
I think if we did this a month ago, I think poor would have been where we are. But I think overall, I know again, if you look at the predictions that people had, some people had Chelsea in the top 4, and I think maybe, and one of those people might have been me. But with the reality of how the season has worked out this year, the fact Chelsea have a chance of finishing 5th and in an automatic Europa League spot. I mean, 6th can also be a Europa League spot if City win the FA Cup. Is bonkers for how we were talking about Chelsea this entire season, and how, say, Spurs, who are only 3 points ahead of Chelsea, have been spoken about this season. Like, the comparison is crazy.
Yeah.
For years, and this is also, for years, I'll say, for this season, like, Chelsea have spent a majority of the season between, like, 8th and 13th. And then over the last month, you've seen them climb the table and results have gone their way as well. You've seen United drop off. You've seen Newcastle have results go against them. And that's where Chelsea are today. And maybe it is a bit more kind of a thinking of more recent results rather than the entire season. But I think fine in the end. Like, I think Chelsea fans would have been happy to have had this kind of season after what happened last year.
Yeah, I agree. I actually think you deserve top 6, which might sound crazy, but I saw metrics like expected points and stuff, and Chelsea are here, Manchester United are here.
Chelsea are like 4th.
They're like 4th or 5th for expected points. And there's been a lot of games this season where Chelsea haven't won or they've dropped points. But I was like, I can sort of see what Poch is trying to do. I can see elements of them actually playing decent stuff. Like this season, I think as a Man United fan, I said if Newcastle and Chelsea finish above us, I can't complain because they've both played better football than us this season in terms of the games I've watched. And I think you've got to remember Poch took over a Chelsea side with a lot of problems, all of that recruitment, and it's been a bit of a mess above him. And while it started slow, I think the most important thing for Chelsea to see this season was progression. You know, it's going to start messy, but Poch is starting to get something together. 4 wins in a row. You're starting to play well. Casado's picking up. Cole Palmer's obviously been 10 times better than I think anyone would have expected. He's been ridiculously good. And yes, Man United have dropped off, and I think Newcastle, if they hadn't had the injuries, would probably have nicked top 4 this season. But I do think, considering where you were last year and the progression and how you sort of turned it around second half of the season, there's a bit of unity there. I do, and obviously the injuries you've had as well. You're another team that's been hit massively by injuries. And I think from watching Chelsea play, they haven't been as bad as 13th, 12th, 11th suggested when they were there. They just had a bit of naivety with maybe young players. So I'd actually put them in fair.
I think I would be happy with that. How do you feel, Pat? Like, I think if Chelsea sorted out their defence this year, things could look a lot different. Like their goals scored this year is nice, like above more than Spurs, like one less than Aston Villa. I mean, Newcastle's is crazy, but they've had a couple of massive games where they've won like 8-0 or so. The defence is where I think Chelsea has really let themselves down this year. Again, only one. Like I think people have criticised Tottenham's defence and how they play this high line and whatever, and Chelsea have conceded one more goal than them as well. But what do you think, Pat? Because I think actually throughout this season, you've been relatively one of the people who haven't gone as hard in on Chelsea.
Yeah, because I thought that, exactly as Alistair said, I could see what they were trying to do at times, and their underlying numbers were generally better than their actual numbers. However, people I think now are going a bit overboard and acting like they've kind of overcome adversity to end up where they are. I'm sorry, this is like a £1 billion squad constructed by a madman. And the fact that Pochettino has managed to get it looking kind of like an upper mid-table Premier League side plus Cole Palmer, is not like an amazing managerial accomplishment. I think that my whole argument was Pochettino doesn't deserve to be sacked given the circumstances, but I also don't think that he deserves an enormous amount of praise. I think he's just done an okay job, and Chelsea have been okay, and they are a one-man team. There's literally nothing else happening at Chelsea except for Cole Palmer. The rest of the team sucks. So I don't know. I think we're kind of talking about them as if oh my God, they pulled themselves out of such a hole. This is amazing. They were terrible. It's just they've literally got the most expensively assembled squad of all time.
But a lot of those
the fact they couldn't put it together, and the fact they've just managed to put it together into some semblance of a football team does not deserve that much praise. But that is the bare minimum. Zach, come on.
My point was going to be
you're talking about Spurs. They could finish by Spurs. It's but Spurs are in Spurs have got Spurs. Yes, but Spurs have got a ton of money. Yeah, but Spurs have got a ton of money this summer that they can go and spend. And Spurs have done all this while building a stadium. They're in a great position for PSR. Spurs spend less on wages, so do Arsenal than Chelsea do, which is
fine.
Bananas. And Spurs also this season playing 2 wing backs as full backs and cobbling together a bunch of stuff in midfield. Chelsea have got a bunch of people Chelsea have bought a bunch of people to be starters in specific positions, and yet have got very, very little out of them, and have had Like, honestly, if you jumble up all the results and just look at the results they've had over the course of the season, to call it anything more than fine would be ludicrous. It's closer to poor than it is to good.
I'm not trying to say it's good at all.
It's just that the wins. Okay, their wins at the end of the season is a good projection for the future. It implies they're getting better. But if you actually jumble up their results and say, like, how do we look at these results, this block of results over the course of a season for Chelsea, having spent all the money that there is in the world,
sure,
it's not good, is it?
No, I'm not saying it's
maybe
good,
fine.
But like when we talk about players, when we talk about teams that have had obviously the injury stuff, like Chelsea and probably United and Newcastle, the ones that have led that, like the injury.
Yeah, but Chelsea have got a much bigger squad than most of those other teams. The drop from Chelsea's first team to its reserves is much smaller than the drop from, say, Spurs or Newcastle. Oh, come on, though. Like, there are also players who don't get used. There are also players who got, like, shipped out. Like, you could have used Maatsen more, for example.
Sure, those ones I completely agree.
Now he's in the Champions League final.
The Maatsen stuff,
could he have been useful for us?
But then who else?
The sixth best team in the Premier League? Yeah,
who else other than Maatsen? Like, otherwise you're looking at these random Brazilian kids.
I think there are moments where other guys could have been used more. Like, I know that there are guys who've been injured a lot of the season, but they haven't been injured every second of the season.
I don't know. I feel like a lot of them have. Lavia's never been there. Ugchukwi's never been there.
Has Lavia even played?
Lavia's played 60 minutes, I think, and then been injured all the rest of it. Reece James, who's now sent off again. Anyway, I'm happy to put. I'm happy with fine, and we'll move on to.
Like, everyone complains about Reece James though, but then like Malo Gusto was great.
Malo Gusto was great, but then he got injured.
Been great.
He's had missed like 12, 13 games.
Sure, but it happened to everybody this season.
Sure, when both of your starting right backs are getting
happened to Liverpool. Look at them. Liverpool kept pace with Arsenal and City for most of the season.
Yeah, but
they'd everyone injured.
They
Newcastle's underlying numbers are as good as Chelsea's, and Newcastle had everyone injured, and then a guy who just like disappeared to betting prison.
Was he?
Is he amazing? I just think that I think we shouldn't be too harsh on Chelsea. I also don't think we should be too lenient.
And I've got them in fine. I think fine is exactly where they should be. Fine is exactly where they should be. Let's move on to Crystal Palace because this is kind of like a Palace of two eras. The Roy Hodgson era, which should be relegated, and the Glasner era, which is pretty good. And I think if you add them together, we would say that's fine/poor.
They're 13th.
Where would we put them? Fine?
I'd find 13th,
Yeah, I think that's a very fair way to look at it. I think Glasner has managed to do some really strong stuff. They're actually 12th at the moment as well. And as I said earlier, they do have the possibility, if results go their way, to finish in 10th above Brighton and above Bournemouth. And this is a side who, again, flashback to 2 months ago, were getting just battered above the relegation zone, getting battered. Again, dealing with injuries to key players in Michael Olise. But he's come back and Glasner's got them playing very, very nice football. And I think Crystal Palace fans, if you talk to them, just are absolutely loving him. I think it's no surprise that Bayern Munich were trying to ask about what's the possibility of getting him to come to Bayern, and the parish was saying, yeah, it'll cost you 100 million to get him, which is
they should
very, very good banter, as they say. But yeah, no, I do feel like this is a kind of a club. A season of 2 seasons, basically, where you've had Glasner's era of only 3 months or coming to 3 months, and Hodgson's, and I think fine, good. I think it's good overall. Like they got Elise on a new contract in the summer. They've managed to get Mateta scoring goals now week in, week out, which is really impressive. And I think maybe if they do end up finishing in 10th, that is a solid year overall, right?
Yeah.
Everyone happy with good?
Yeah, I'm happy with
Glasner's definitely been good, yeah.
Okay. Very interested to see what happens next year if they do manage to keep hold of some key players as well. So from Crystal Palace to Everton. Now, without points being deducted, Everton would currently sit in 12th. Because I think that's what we've got to kind of remember with how their season has been. Like, obviously, they've had the kind of talk about relegation zone stuff and so on and so forth. But if you add back their 6 points that they've been deducted in the league, that would take them to sitting above, well, actually, just under Crystal Palace. So it would have them 13th, but with the possibility of where Palace are, where they could finish above Brighton in that era. And so if we look at it like that, where do we put Everton? Patrice?
I think this is good. I think if you look at the underlying numbers and if you watch Everton, I'm like, this looks pretty good. You know, like they're not an easy team to play against. They obviously got that incredible statement win over Liverpool, which was totally deserved. And all season long, they've been a bit unlucky in the. Well, I say a bit unlucky. So,
sorry, they've actually been just 8 points, so they would be sitting much higher.
They'd be. I think they'd be 11th.
They would.
And actually, by expected points, they're 9th, just below Spurs. Like literally half a point below Spurs.
Wow,
that's crazy. But I've actually never seen a team get as unlucky in attack as they have been this season. Unlucky / underperform. They cannot finish. They're down 21 on their expected goals. They've got expected goals of 60. They've scored 39.
That's better.
It's not just better. It's Calvert-Lewin as well. Calvert-Lewin is also a career underperformer in expected goals, as good as he is in lots of ways. But Everton's sole goal in life has to be stay in the Premier League because they're facing financial oblivion if they drop. Yeah. The 777 partner situation is scary because they're still being allowed to put money into the club despite the fact that 777 partners is in trouble of its own. And if they get wound up and the money has to go back to a creditor, then Everton are going to be massively in the hole. And you might have to see the league step in to figure something out. That's how scary a situation it is for Everton. Among all that, they've won 13 games, which is pretty remarkable. They are horrible to play against. They have a distinctive style. They've developed ways of progressing the ball without Iwobi, who I thought was going to be a big loss for them.
Yeah.
Despite the fact their attackers can't score, like they've still managed to stay pretty well clear of relegation for a while now. And despite that points deduction, like that points deduction is so big. It's enormous. And they're still nowhere near relegation. Like they're 14 points clear of Luton. That is so amazing. Like I honestly think Dyche manager of the season, like truly should be in that conversation. Like it is an impossible job. The Everton squad I think is horrible.
Yeah.
You know, like there are a couple of good players in it, but I think it's really all over the place. Like there are places in that team where there's just nothing. And I've just been really impressed by them. I really think they don't get enough credit for it. If they were 11th now,
definitely.
If they were level on points with Brighton and Bournemouth, level with Bournemouth, and everyone's like, Bournemouth, what a season they're having. They've got a striker who scored 19 goals in the league.
Yeah.
If Everton are level with them, I think that is so insane. And more importantly, I think there are a lot of managers here who their performance this season has like maybe got that team like 3 places higher than it would normally be. You know, would Bournemouth normally be 14th? This year they're 11th.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
But one manager's performance this season has potentially saved that club from oblivion.
Yeah. No.
And that is Dyche. That is Sean Dyche. That is so incredible to me. I honestly think he deserves so much credit for what he's done. I think it's an amazing managerial performance.
They're going into good. They are going into good.
Team of the season, Zach.
Well, you guys can debate that one in the comments.
That is a bit strong. But I really do. I feel very passionate about Everton.
No, fair enough. They are going in good. We're going to have to rattle through some of these as well. Fulham lost a lot of key players in the summer. Ended up, obviously, safe as well. Another one of those clubs that I kind of think for a few years now need to make sure they're in the Premier League. Pretty safe early on as well. Have had some interesting games. I think they've managed to, the one against Arsenal in particular, could be the one that decides the title at the top. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I've got a friend that's a Fulham fan who, when he talks about Fulham now, obviously not actually being Henry, but I think Henry kind of shares the same thing. And he said it's weird. I think he said it a few times where like you just don't really expect much. Like you're just kind of hoping to stay in the Premier League, and after that, anything else is a plus. And I think that's kind of how this season has been. And so I would have them in the fine category. When you're losing Mitrovic, who's that key guy up top for them. So they may have found that, another one as well this season. I think fine is where we kind of have to put Fulham. Yeah. Everyone happy?
Yep.
Good. Liverpool. I think overall, Liverpool have to be in good, really. Like they were for a long time challenging for the Premier League title with a squad that isn't as good as Arsenal's and Man City's, if we're being honest.
Injuries as well.
Injuries as well to a lot to key players. People will debate whether the Jurgen Klopp news helped or maybe actually didn't help the Liverpool squad. But overall, this was a Liverpool squad that finished outside of the Champions League places last year and struggled a lot last year as well, and have managed to be the third best team in England, and at times were leading the table.
Yeah.
They've done a really good job this year. I think defence is probably what's let them down overall. Like goal scoring wise and attacking wise, they've only scored 5 less goals than Arsenal this season.
And their attack by the underlying numbers is the best in the league.
Yes, exactly. They've had Núñez miss a lot of chances, Diaz miss a lot of chances, Gakpo as well, like numerous names. I think it's probably been the defence that's been the worrying factor, and I do want we have a lot of questions for what will happen next year. But I think this year has given them something to possibly build on next year as well with Arne Slot if they keep everyone and if they develop the side even further. But yeah, I think it's good. How do you feel about Liverpool, Alice?
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. Also, not related to the Premier League, but they won the Carabao Cup with all the kids as well. Mm-hmm. And I think with Liverpool, everyone thought Arsenal, City were top 2. And Liverpool took Man City and Arsenal to the very end and then dropped off in March. Kind of like Arsenal did last season. They took City to the end and then they dropped off in March. And I think with Liverpool, the injuries they've had, you've seen some of the teams, they've had Bradley and Kwanzaa playing at the back and Joe Gomez at left back a couple of games. Yeah. They lost, 4 midfielders or 5, Henderson, Fabinho, Milner, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Keita. They had to completely rebuild a midfield. I think the fact that they had to completely rebuild the whole midfield, they didn't finish in the top 4 last season. They've had injuries. I think all of that, I think the fact that they took it and then that last month they just dropped off, and if Núñez had, scored a couple more chances, if Jota maybe stayed fit longer, because he's quite a clutch player that puts his chances away. And I think when the football they've played, I think sometimes they're the best to watch in a weird way. And I hate saying that as a United fan, but Man City and Arsenal are like the best. But like sometimes with Liverpool, because it's a little bit more exciting to watch.
More fun, yeah. More end to end, more things happening in those degrees.
Yeah, as much as I hate to say that, like I'll give them credit for that. So I do think they've actually had quite a good season, even though they've dropped off, which is nice for me that they've dropped off though.
They've drawn quite a few games. I think that's also where we've got to look at it.
They've drawn 10 games.
10 games. I think only the next highest is Brighton, and they are the highest with 12. Because they've lost less than Arsenal. They've lost less games than Arsenal by 1. Arsenal lost 5, they've lost 4. And the 10 draws, I think, has been, where things haven't quite gone their way. But overall, I think they've been good. Like, they've been very good this year. And so that's where they'll go in our category. In the good category, over to Luton Town, fine. I've put them actually. Like, no one expected Luton to be... Everyone thought Luton would get relegated. Luton have been relegated, unless some
and deservedly
crazy thing happens. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like all the teams that have been relegated deserve to be relegated in the sense that they are the 3 worst teams in the league, but they don't deserve it in the sense of they didn't underperform, do something stupid. Like they just came up with like worse resources than the teams in the league.
Like the fact Luton were in the Premier League in the first place was crazy, and they actually I think made a really good go of it. They've had some really
scored quite a lot
good
of goals.
Results. They did, and again when you look at the budgets that Luton have compared to everyone else, it's mental. And I think next year they'll go down, they'll get the parachute payments, and like I think Rob Edwards has proven he's a solid manager and can maybe cut out if people looking for a manager to manage in the Premier League in the coming seasons if he wants to leave. And you never know, we might see them come back up as well. And like if they managed to do a good job last time, who knows what happens there? But I put them in fine. Everyone agree?
Yeah,
sure.
Perfect. Manchester City. Now, I know we've said that Man City have been worse this year than normal, but I still think they've had a good season, right? Like, it's hard to debate when you...
They're probably going to win the league.
Like, exactly. It's hard to debate, isn't it? Overall.
But there is a drop-off.
There is.
This is a side who, like, if you just look at where they're going to end up points-wise, you'd be forgiven for thinking they were as good as they were last season. And they've not been as good as they were last season. Like, last season, Arsenal were amazing for the first half of the season and only were just keeping pace with City in the underlying numbers. Like as much as Arsenal were way ahead, and then City just pulled away second half of the season. This year, Arsenal have been ahead of City most of the time, and it's been Arsenal, City and Liverpool in like a close bunch, and then Liverpool dropped off. So City being just like far and away the best team in the league, that actually hasn't happened this year. But that's more of like a question for Pep, like what's going on? What's the next evolution of this side, especially as De Bruyne becomes like less reliable?
Injury prone,
But it doesn't mean that it's not like a very good season. Like it obviously is a very good. They're going to win the league.
It's so like, what do you say about a team that's probably going to win 4 in a row? Like it's very
hard. And their form since Christmas has been wild. Like Arsenal are like 15-1-1 or something, and I think they've won something like 19 in the last 22 games, something like that. Man City, like it's just they just have been a machine,
and
it's
that classic Man City, right? Like they get to the February bit and they just get Christmas, and they just go win.
So they've got that mentality; they just do it.
And sometimes they absolutely annihilate teams as well. Like what was the game recently? Like Haaland scored nearly 5.
Fulham, was it?
Yeah, it might have been. Whatever. It was at the Etihad. It was something crazy. But yeah, in terms of the Premier League season, good. I think that's fair enough to say for Manchester City. Now, let's talk, Alice, about Manchester United. Because the reason I made Let's Relegate Them category was for Man United. I've put them in should be relegated, to be quite honest, guys.
They've been so appalling.
So bad.
We've got to win the FA Cup. That will save us from relegation.
I think even Manchester United being in 8th, and for a long time they were at 6th and so on and so forth, even being in 8th is so kind.
Their underlying numbers are 15th, though.
That's what I mean. They're so kind.
50.
They
scored
should
5
be in the
goals
bottom
and
half of the
losing.
table. They should be in the bottom half of the table. Like
they're dreadful. They've been dreadful.
I don't know how you were so far.
How are you feeling about Ten Hag? Because last time we were on this together, you were like, "I'm kind of like the last surviving defender of
Eric."
Eric, and now
I look at it and go, we've been awful. The underlining numbers are awful. But I also think injuries have been awful. No left back all season. And one of the reasons I stick up for Rashford and Garnacho, whoever's playing left wing, is now we've got no left back. They're isolated. I don't think that helps the attack, weirdly. He's wanted to play a more intense style of football this season, but you've got Casemiro and Eriksen in midfield who don't have the legs. You've got all the injuries. Martinez, in pre-season, he was stepping out from defence into midfield, and Martinez and Luke Shaw were so key to everything we did in build-up. So I understand that with the amount of players missing, we can't do what we want to do, but I also understand the football is so bad. I'm at the stance now of there's not many managers that I think are necessarily an improvement in Ten Hag given the circumstances, the injuries and stuff. But I think, look, if Thomas Tuchel's available, there's no doubt in my mind he is a better manager than Ten Hag. Whereas if it was a few names like Potter and De Zerbi, I'd be like, I'd rather stick with Ten Hag and just give him another season. There's a lot of people saying, why don't we give Ten Hag one more season? Look at how maybe McKenna does in the Premier League, because he obviously worked under Ollie and had a good relationship with some players. But I think this season for United has been very disappointing because last season we came third, we won the Carabao Cup, there was excitement. I think the transfer window was particularly disappointing. We didn't get Harry Kane, although we probably would have starved him of service anyway. Mount just basically hasn't played. He's been a bit like Lavia, but has played a few more games. Like he's just been injured, he can't stay fit. Anana we signed to play out from the back, but because of the defensive injuries, I think we've had 14 different back lines this season, 14 different centre-back pairings, and I think we've had something like 33 different back lines in 49 games because of injuries.
Wow.
So I get to an extent, like Anana we're not playing out from the back, but it's annoying. We're getting Anana to play out from the back. He's kicking it long, so what's the point in that? We should have got a DM. I think we should have gone all out for Declan Rice, but that wasn't going to happen. He wanted Arsenal. Hoyland's inexperienced. I really like Hoyland, actually. I think the hate he gets is a bit over the top.
Does he get hate?
Yeah, he gets hate.
From United fans?
From United fans as well. It's mostly, I think, rivals, but a few United fans are like, oh, he's not good enough, all of this.
He's 19.
He's 20.
He's not 19.
He's 20, and he's got 15 goals this season in all competitions with no service whatsoever. Like, I think that's not too bad considering when we signed him, I said if he gets 15 goals, it's a good season. Because
a great season.
I think we signed him on 9 goals from Atalanta. So I think, look, United have definitely been poor. I wouldn't put us in the relegation category just because of the no left back, the injuries, the issues. But FA Cup, that's the only way we're going to save ourselves and get Europa League, I think.
God, yeah.
It's still not good enough, but.
Well, yeah, I think I agree completely, Alice. Like, I think they've I don't understand. One thing I will say as a praise is somehow United, I don't know if it's through the willpower of Alex Ferguson, but they just win games somehow. The fact United have won 17 Premier League games this season is mad.
Like Brentford.
That's individual quality though, don't you think? Like when I watch Man United win games, I'm just like, they do have players who
normally
can do it in
Bruno
moments. It's
just
normally Bruno.
It is
does
normally Bruno,
something crazy,
Bruno's
like
done
some
something,
pass. He's a bit like, well, not Cole Palmer, but it can be the Bruno show sometimes.
And you had those,
He is.
I think
He's
about those,
just like that.
I
Like,
think
it's
about
just like, who's the guy who's going to drag you through this game? Like, Odegaard's like that for us. Palmer's like that for you. De Bruyne has historically been that for City. Bruno is that one guy who's like got the magic. I mean, Garnacho has a little bit as well, but it is basically Bruno.
Yeah. And there's been so many games where like United have scored, managed to score like, and I think you got the or something go their way. You think about both Wolves games,
but you don't need to give them credit for that. They got points for that.
We were shocking.
No, I'm not giving credit. I'm just saying how it's happened.
We were shocking versus Brentford, and Mount came off the bench and scored, and Brentford could have been 4-0 up. I mean, both games against Everton were awful, but Garnacho scores a bicycle kick and turns into
the Wolves games. You think first game of the season, Wolves like you win 1-0 and Onana maybe gives away that pen, but doesn't get given.
Yeah.
The second Wolves game where they score, then you end up scoring last minute.
Yeah,
Mad.
I mean,
Madness.
a lot of last-minute winners.
Yeah, but look, we'll put them in poor. They have not.
Deserve to be relegated.
They have not been.
They
relegated.
do deserve to be. No team has underperformed its resources. Oh, except Chelsea, of course. But no team has underperformed its resources the way Man United have.
Yeah, I think it's officially the worst season ever, isn't it? In terms of like points-wise, everything.
Most losses ever in a season.
Officially the
worst.
I
think least goals scored, less points than Moyes. There's someone made a list on Twitter of like every record Ten Hag had broke that was awful this season, and I was going on and on. I was like, no.
Brutal as the last Ten Hag supporter. Okay, then from one United to another Newcastle United. I think for a team again who had a lot of injuries, had to deal with Champions League football as well. Their kind of first forays into that competition in a long time. Gave it a good go. Had some interesting games as well. Some destroyed PSG. And then obviously ended up finishing bottom of that group. But that doesn't really matter in terms of this. We're just looking at the Premier League season, and are currently sitting in 7th. They're basically 7th guaranteed. Like they don't really have a chance to go above Chelsea, because even if they do get 3 points, they would take that back. I've read the goal difference all the way around. If they get 3 points and Chelsea lose to Bournemouth, they would finish in 6th, and so they could get that other Europa League position. After the Manchester United result, where they lost to United, it does also give Man United a chance to finish as well in 7th if Newcastle lose their last game of the season. So, Pat, what do we make of Newcastle's year? Because I've put them in fine, and maybe last year, I think it was said multiple times that last year they had gone over what everyone expected, and actually maybe this year we should expect kind of a drop off. What do you think? How did they perform with all the injuries and all the context around their season? Sandro Tonali not being there as well.
They performed exactly as you'd expect a relatively thin squad to perform that has a load of injuries. Like there were points in the season, especially before Christmas, where they were playing like Champions League quality football. And even in the Champions League, obviously like absolutely demolished PSG, who ended up in the semi-final of the Champions League. They've put in some very impressive performances. Even the first day of the season up against Villa, like when people were like, Villa, what could they do this season? Obviously, they've ended up having a great year, but like Newcastle just destroyed them.
5-0.
I think it was 5-1. But like they've been, but then obviously had horrible injuries, and losing Tonali was a big problem, because as much as they've got a load of money, you can't just go out and buy like 6 midfielders in a summer. You do have to do it slowly. And when one of those guys who you spent like, what was it,
65?
Then just disappears for the entire season, you are gonna have no legs when it comes to it. Like they were in that much of a worse position because of that. I think it's definitely been fine. If they end up 6th, I honestly think that'd be kind of good in the circumstances. Like, yes, it is a step back on last season, but it's not embarrassing. The only worry for them is if they have to sell an asset this summer. Rather, if that asset is Isak. He's like the one guy they should do everything to keep hold. They should sell anyone before.
Well, I think they've said they want to sell. They'd rather sell Bruno than sell.
Well, they're right to do that.
Isak.
I think that's smart. But Isak has been incredible this season, despite being injured a lot. I don't know, man. I think it's definitely fine. There was talk at one point that Eddie Howe could be like, could they find him? Could they move on? I think that is nuts. I think he's done a great job in trying circumstances.
I agree.
No, I completely agree. I'm happy to put them in fine. I think that's fair enough. Again, let us know, Newcastle fans, what you think of your season, or non-Newcastle fans as well. Maybe a little bit more of a less biased view. Nottingham Forest.
Now we're talking.
Do you think they should be relegated?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Why do you think that, Pat?
Because they're crap. They're not actually that bad. They're not. There are teams in the league who have like worse underlying numbers than them. But I do think they're pretty dire, to be honest with you. And they also deserve it for their whining about decisions, which was crazy.
Yeah,
that was mad.
Because I think it's one thing for a team to say this was a bad decision and it's cost us. That's not what Forest said. Forest were like, this is basically corruption and it's costing us.
Yeah.
Like, and that is a really different sort of thing to say. Like, everybody has an issue with bad refs, but everybody kind of gets screwed over by bad refs.
Yeah.
But if you're coming out and saying that like refs are actually biased, like, I think that is completely wrong, for one, because nobody cares enough about Forest to be biased against them. But also, I think that really does present a problem for the kind of integrity of the league. Like, you've seen Wolves have come out with their proposal for VAR to be scrapped. And one of their points on there was they said, this allows ridiculous claims of corruption to fester, and it absolutely does. But the fact that Forest did that as a professional football club, like, I expect fans to say it.
Yeah.
Every fan says it, sure. And some fans, I think there's, in certain circumstances, there's a little bit more of a case than I think people pretend there is. But not really.
Yeah.
I don't think there's corruption among referees. I just think there might be unconscious biases among referees.
Yeah.
Because there are among everybody.
I also think we just have bad referees as well.
Sure, but Forest coming out and saying what they said, I think, was a genuine problem for the league. And also shut up and also get better at football. Because you spent a bunch of money years ago and you broke the rules in order to spend that money and you still suck.
Or even if they
and you hired Nuno, which is an embarrassing decision that I hate.
Even if they didn't have the 4 points taken off them, they would still be in the exact same position on 17th, just above the relegation zone, but they were on 33 points. And I kind of feel like it's one of those years where you say, they're quite lucky that there are just three worst teams going. Like, those three teams that got promoted, we all said
they might go down next
probably
year.
go down. I think the same. If Leicester are coming up, who look like a side that can be developed, and obviously a bit more of a side that are I'd say probably more Premier League quality than say like the Sheffield United or Luton or even Burnley, then Forest have a very good chance possibly if they don't change their way. They have maybe more recently, but had been playing a little bit better football. They almost beat Chelsea last week.
Wow.
I think they've managed to get a couple of players.
Almost beating Chelsea. What would that feel like?
They've managed to have a couple of players come back as well. I think they've had a really good season with Callum Hudson-Odoi on that left flank.
He's been good.
Alanga, I think, has been really good. They've had to deal with Awioni injuries too. Gibbs White actually has dropped off a little bit this year, but past couple of games have been all right. But yeah, all right. I'll put them in the should be relegated category. Someone's got to join the other three that are down there. Luton didn't go in there, so that can be the three. That
and look at their talent
there.
versus those relegated clubs.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
they shouldn't be near
Gibbs
them.
White,
It's mental, right? Have made several bad decisions in picking their goalkeeper. Bought three different goalkeepers in. They're all bad.
Sold them Matt Turner. Great.
Yeah, it's been a very poor season for them. Sheffield United, then, arguably the second worst team, if not the worst team we've ever seen in Premier League history. They got more points than Derby, but they've been the first team to concede as many goals as they have. 101 goals they've conceded this year. Do you know how mad that is? 101 goals. One of the first team ever to concede over 100 goals. I just felt like they never had a chance ever. Again, didn't have the budgets. They didn't have the budgets. They never had the players. There's been some interesting players there. Hammer, I think, is someone who could probably get a move to the back to the Premier League.
But even having to sell like Berger, it's like, what are you going to do? You're behind the eight ball from the start.
They really were. And then, I thought their managerial decision, it didn't work the last time with Chris Wilder. Shock horror, it didn't work the second time either.
Last time we played them though, they played us when we were on an absolute heater, January, February, and I was just I don't know, doing something, and turned on the game 15 minutes late, and we were 3-0 up.
Yeah, shock.
And I was just as I was watching, and then we scored a fourth goal as I was watching, and I was like, this is actually this is a little bit sad to watch. It's just not. It's funny when we beat Chelsea 5-0 because Chelsea are theoretically, a good football club.
Some say.
But when you're battering a team like that who basically has had no resources with which to protect themselves, you're kind of is this just feels unfair?
Newcastle as well.
Yes.
Like
you watch those games. You watch those games, and you're like, "Can we just stop this? Like, this just doesn't need to go
Newcastle
on."
Like had a couple of injuries, and they just went, "Oh yeah, 8-0, easy, done." And I was like,
I feel like as well, like if you're one of the players there, it must be such a
Exactly. You're like, what are you gonna do?
Like,
you put in a shift every week.
Yeah, and get absolutely destroyed. But yeah, back down to the championship. I think again, if you ask these fans, they're probably quite looking forward to it. Back to a year where they can actually start playing football again and enjoying going to games. But yeah, got to be in the should be relegated category, unfortunately. Sorry, Sheffield United fans. Tottenham Hotspur. Good.
yeah,
I think they have managed to. More recently, things haven't gone so well. I don't think they've helped themselves in those ways. They've had a couple, again, more recently had a couple of injuries. They relied a lot on Maddison early on, and when he went out injured, they didn't have a lot of creativity happening for them. I think you've started to see that they're going to have to try and bring in some reinforcements in attack. Like Timo Werner was a good loan move. People say that for 15 million quid, it might be worth the buy in the summer. But they need to improve, I think, a bit more clinically as well. Like Richarlison has had a fine year.
Yeah.
Kulusevski has probably been quite poor this year, especially when he's been played out on the wing. Brennan Johnson has been okay generally. And I think if you look at what Ange has done with the squad, it's really impressive. Like, it's been a good year for them. Ultimately, I mean, it's funny that, like, with the way things have been recently, and now Ange being kind of quite angry at how things have ended up.
It's done like a 360.
It's quite a weird way, I think, for Spurs to end the season. I think they're playing Sheffield United as well on the last day of the season, so maybe they'll end things quite nicely on that front.
They need to have a good result though, because
that's
the one
they can't lose.
That is the one thing about it as well, though. You look at that, you know. Okay, they're glad to lose to City from the point of view of, like, it basically almost certainly denies Arsenal the title, but like they could have got fourth. They could have got fourth. Like, they had that week. They'd come off a 4-0 loss to Newcastle, and then they had that week where they had Arsenal, Liverpool, and Chelsea all in one week, and they lost all of them, and they conceded with those 3 games in Newcastle, I think 13 goals and scored 4. It's like that's really bad. Like, they could genuinely have got top 4, and it would have been transformative for that project. I mean, I still think they're fine. I still think it's a really good foundation for the season. Like, they've done really well to cope with injuries. They've obviously found, like a diamond in Van de Ven. Doggy's had a really good season.
They lost Kane as well.
They lost Kane. You can't say it's not a good season, I don't think.
No, I agree.
But there must be a bit of disappointment for them there, knowing that at one point it was almost within their grasp, and then they just got, like, battered.
Yeah, and that was funny as well, because for a long time everyone was saying, like, oh, Spurs could decide the title.
Just lost all 3.
Just lost all 3 in the end.
Yeah.
And I'm interested for next year, because it kind of feels like people are already starting to figure out Ange's tactics. Like, a long time now, people are saying they haven't got a plan B.
No, but he did run out of plan B against Man City. He tried something really different against Man City, and it was very I'd say it was very effective for the first half. And also,
if Son scores that goal,
that chance away, who knows? So I don't know. I don't think he's a one trick pony, but it's quite difficult to work on new tactical shapes when everyone's injured.
He needs to get back.
I think he could get top 4 next season if he got backs. I think they just need a proper striker, another winger, probably a number 6. Bit of depth.
Yeah. But that's the thing. Like, a part of me kind of thought slightly, like, has he been told, how he's reacting to the press conference recently?
Yeah.
Has he been told, actually, like, you haven't got a lot of money to spend in this summer, and that was maybe part of the anger? I don't know. We'll see come the summer. And because a lot of their business this year was pretty decent. And as you said, Van de Ven is definitely one of the stars of the season, that's for sure. So we're putting them in good. Spurs fans, let us know what you think of your season. I think if you guys were offered 5th place at the beginning of the year, you would have snatched everyone's hands to take that. West Ham United, I also know that wasn't the saying, but whatever. West Ham United, currently sitting in 9th place. They have guaranteed 9th place as well. They can't go to 8th. They can't be overtaken by Brighton, who are in 10th. It's It's interesting because I think again they had a poor year in the league last year. Obviously, had incredible things happen in terms of what happened in Europe. They lost such an important player in Declan Rice, and I think generally did an okay job in rather than going, okay, we're going to try and buy one player that can fix that role. They put the money in several different positions. Looking like they're going to be getting in Lopetegui for next year as well, which I think is a really, really good move.
Very good.
And so for David Moyes' final year at West Ham, and who knows, maybe he might call it after that as well. I think is it fine or is it good? West Ham finishing in ninth. It's not good.
I think it's fine because they've really dropped off.
Drawn 10 games this year. Yeah, they started the year really, really well.
And also have been quite a lot worse than their position.
They have, underperforming numbers. They have.
Their expected points are like 15th. And the defence, the only teams in the league who've conceded more goals are the relegated 3 sides. Like that's pretty bad. I mean, like again, like I don't say that they really deserve to be like. I think it's part of the way that Moyes plays.
Yeah.
But I think that they deserve lower more than they deserve higher. I don't know, but they did lose Rice. Like I don't know. I think it's fine.
Yeah, I think
fine.
In the medium, fine. It's a good place to put them, and it'll be really interesting what they do in the summer and with Lopetegui there and what kind of happens in that mould. But we will see. So fine for West Ham United. I think some West Ham fans, they will say it's been poor because a lot of their West Ham fans seem to kind of want a lot more than maybe they're given at times. On to the last one then, Wolverhampton Wanderers. And again, I think we've got to put the context here of what was happening before the season started. They lost Lopetegui. They didn't have a manager until about 2 weeks before the season. They lost Mateus Nunes. They didn't really spend a lot in the summer. They couldn't spend a lot in the summer. Everyone was predicting them to get relegated.
Yeah.
Everyone. And they have had a pretty good year in the end. They are currently sitting in 13th. Have a chance, possibly again, if results go their way, to finish in 10th. Gary O'Neill, again, we talk about managers who could be in contention for Manager of the Year with all the pre-context. He's done a super, super good job, and I think good is where Wolves should be.
Yeah, they've been hit with injuries as well to key players. I mean, Neto just can't seem to stay fit for more than 5 games, but even Cunha was out for a bit. They've had other key players out. And I think, to be fair, like, my stepdad's a Wolves fan, so I've watched a few games of him this season, and they actually do look all right. And they've got some good players like Cunha, I'm a massive fan of. Aït-Nouri, obviously Neto, and I think considering that everyone was like, they're going to be relegated, like Neves is gone, Nunes is gone, manager's gone, and Lopetegui was quite highly rated at Wolves. I'd say they've definitely been all right.
I completely agree. Like again, Wolves, I feel like have become one of those teams this year where you didn't want to play them. Like when you had them in the fixture list, they weren't fun, and sometimes they perform poorly, and like they've had they've had a lot of decisions go against them. They've had a lot of times.
Yeah, this is why they're like, we should get rid of
no
this
shot.
sucks.
No shot.
I think they've had like 7 VAR overturns that have gone against them, which could be like
league,
14 more points or something.
Oh my god!
Again, like you just think for the first day of the season, like the Onana one, like they've had quite a few this year. Bless them. So they've had a good year. Bless them.
Bless them.
I don't know what I'm saying there. But they've had a good year, and they finish off our tier list. The tier list will be on screen right now. What do you guys think of it? Who should be higher? Who should be lower? Let us know in the comments below. Really quickly, final thing, guys. Really, really quickly. Should VAR be scrapped? No, is what I would say. Especially with now the offside thing coming in, automatic offsides.
I think the problem's those who use VAR. I'll be honest with you, I feel like it's used so badly, and they try and nitpick the tiniest thing to rule a goal out, and I think there needs to be a bit more clarity on the rules, and they need to get better people to use it. I think if it's used properly, it's good.
I agree.
But
I agree completely.
But at the moment, I don't think it's worth the faff every week.
So do you think if it's not got the right people in it, it should be scrapped?
At this rate, because every week there's just a faff, there's an outrage, VAR this, VAR that. Like human error in a game, you can't help that. Human error with VAR, you can, and then you get clubs coming out, putting statements out, and it's just like, oh.
I just feel like if we scrap it, we're going to go back. It's going to be back and forth. Like for 2 years, we'll then have things where, penalties aren't given that are blatant or handballs
Yeah,
or
that's
whatever
the
that are
problem.
blatant.
And it's still going to be in like the
And then everyone's
Champions
going to
League
go,
and stuff.
yeah, it's still be in the Champions League and stuff. And then everyone's going to go, oh, I wish we had VAR back or whatever. It'll be this constant back and forth.
Yeah.
I genuinely think they won't. I don't think enough clubs will vote for it because I think they need 14 of the 20 clubs to vote against it to get rid of it. But Pat, would you scrap it?
Yeah, I kind of would. Like,
It would make it more fun in terms of like knowing it's a goal. Like,
I don't trust that. Yeah, exactly. And I don't trust the refs to know what they're doing. I think when you bring in automated offside, that takes quite a lot of decisions out of their hands anyway. But Wolves kind of made one of their points was something like, like, oh, it's taking over like the narrative. It's like what we talk about every week. It was like that's what it was like before.
It was definitely.
That's the way it's always been.
Will be.
If you pick a match of the day episode from like 15 years ago, turn it on, and they won't analyze the game. They will talk about whether this was a penalty, whether that should have been a red card. However, they're completely right that a lot of it has gone from overturning clear and obvious errors to nitpicking subjective decisions.
100%.
Like, and our discourse about it on social media. No matter how much you explain to people, the ref's decision stands. Like, you may think that's wrong, but VAR can't. If there's like contact on a penalty, you may think it's not a penalty, but if the ref gives it, VAR can't overturn it unless it's clearly wrong. No matter how many times we explain that process to people, no one seems to get it. And the conversation gets worse and worse. So I kind of think we're better off not having it at all. I mean, I really do think automated offside will help a lot.
Yeah.
And it is boring. It does like ruin the flow of games. It is annoying when you score and you don't even celebrate because you're waiting to see if it will get chalked off. It is frustrating. And I do think that like it does seem like some of the time VAR is like, no, ref decision stands, and other times VAR is like, hang on, and they do like basically overturn a ref's decision.
Yeah.
And if I were a ref, I'd be like, I have no idea whether my bad decision is going to stand or be corrected, or whether my good decision is going to be overturned. Like, I have no idea what's going to happen. And they're coming out and like apologizing, which I think is kind of embarrassing. Like, I do just sort of want the VAR conversation to be over, and I'm fine with it going. And then like in 5-10 years, they're like,
bringing it back.
We are going to bring it back. We've worked on our process. But essentially, you're right. Refereeing's bad. They need to put loads more money in refereeing because it's a pretty thankless task. You need to make it an attractive job so people who aren't idiots want to go into it. And then they need to train people properly. And I think it's perfectly fine for VAR to iterate in different leagues for a while and to send refs to those leagues and learn about how it's being used and then try it again in a few years' time. But right now, it's just boring.
I feel generally, when I think of the international big competitions, so the Euros when it was used and the World Cup when it was used pretty well. Like, I don't think anyone was ever complaining too much. If I remember correctly. And obviously they've got like the best officials in the world all there. So maybe that has a part to do with it. But yes, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Should VAR be scrapped? Get down there and let me know. Alice, thank you so much for coming on the channel. If people at home want to check your stuff out, where should they go?
Just type Alice Talks Football into YouTube, TikTok and Twitter and I'll come up. That's mostly Man United content on there. And my second channel, Aquila Football, does clubs that aren't Manchester United. Thank you. Well,
and thank you so much, Alice, for coming on. I'll also link them in the description below as well. Patrice Van Straten. If I want to hear about some unseen incidents, where should I go?
To the Unseen Incidents podcast, which you can find on your favourite podcast app. You can also subscribe to our Patreon, which gets you extra episodes and the right to ask questions, sending questions from me and Pete Dorman. Yeah, that's it, I think.
Well, the last one of the season. We'll be talking about transfers probably for the next 3 months.
No, there's the Euros.
There is the Euros. Good point well made. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and we'll see you guys very, very soon. Bye.